Hello, my friends. Welcome to our Thursday Thank a Theologian, this May 7th, 2020. We are learning more about Martin Luther. We're going to be taking a look at different theologians each week and giving them thanks for what they teach us about God and God's amazing love for us. But today we're taking a look at Martin Luther. He was born on November 10th in 1483 and died on February 18th, 1546. He's a German theologian and religious reformer who was the catalyst of the 16th century Protestant Reformation. He's one of the most influential figures in the history of Christianity. He did so much for the church, and I'm actually sitting outside right now. You might be able to hear the wind blowing because part of the influence of, or something that was influential in his life was a rather windy and stormy day, just like I'm about to have right now. You can hear the wind going. He began his undergrad in he received his undergraduate degree in 1502, his master's degree in 1505, and he began his doctorate at Wittenberg, which he completed in 1512. After he completed his doctorate, he was then able to move on to teaching. And one of the students that he had said that he was a man of middle stature with a voice that combined sharpness and the enunciation of syllables and words and softness in tone. He spoke neither too quickly nor too slowly, but at an even pace, without hesitation and very clearly. He was just a regular guy who was dedicated and devoted to God, but he was going to go into a career of law until a thunderstorm. He said to God, apparently, that he would devote himself to God if he lived through the thunderstorm. And so, a couple weeks after beginning his time studying law, he gave that up and went on to study theology. And that led to the rest of his life, which was instrumental in all of us, Protestants and even Catholics today, as we look and see how our understanding of God's love has been shaped by Martin Luther. And it really got to a head on October 31st in 1517. Martin Luther supposedly nailed his 95 theses to the door of a chapel at Wittenberg, speaking out against what he saw were errors in the Roman Catholic Church. And that led to the rest of his pretty much the rest of his life was working through that and what that meant to himself and to others. The Roman Catholic Church was not exactly very happy, specifically the Pope, because Martin Luther wasn't exactly kind in some of the things that he had to say. But mostly he said that grace is not a work of man, but it is a work of God. When it comes to grace, it is all about divine grace. However, as a result of him posting these theses against what the Pope was saying at the time, on January 3rd, 1521, Martin Luther was formally declared a heretic. Now, some of the things that shaped Martin Luther's life and his beliefs, he believed that the Bible alone is the source of Christian truth, and his related belief that everyone is capable of understanding the biblical message. For Martin Luther, one of the most important things for him was the doctrine of justification. By faith alone, through God's grace, sinners were declared righteous. He taught that salvation and redemption is a gift of God's grace, attainable only through faith in Jesus. He is quoted as saying, "This one and firm rock, which we call the doctrine of justification, is the chief article of the whole Christian doctrine, which comprehends the understanding of all godliness." He also went on to call the doctrine the article of the standing and falling church. If this article stands, the church stands. If it falls, the church falls. Luther also understood that justification was entirely the work of God. When God's righteousness is mentioned in the gospel for Luther, it is God's action of declaring righteous the unrighteous sinner who has faith in Jesus Christ. The righteousness by which the person is justified is not his own, but that of another, that of Jesus Christ. That is why faith alone makes someone just and fulfills the law. Faith is what brings the Holy Spirit through the merits of Christ. Thus, faith for Luther is a gift from God and a living, bold trust in God's grace, so certain of God's favor that it would risk death 1,000 times trusting in it. This faith for Luther grasps Christ's righteousness and appropriates it for the believer. Luther has lots to say about justification and of the importance of our justification through Jesus Christ and the mercy of God through Christ. But two of my favorite quotes that I have for Martin Luther, there are two that I've always held with me, and I commend them to you to consider and to think about. One is a short one, a nice and easy one. He says, "Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree." I just love that one for some reason. But his second one is one that maybe you're feeling a little frustrated about what's going on. Maybe you're having some difficulties with the way that things are playing out in your life. And I hold on to this quote from Martin Luther sometimes. It really helps me. He says, "I never work better than when I am inspired by anger, for when I am angry, I can write, pray, and preach well. For then my whole temperament is quickened, my understanding sharpened, and all mundane vexations and temptations depart." Sometimes when we have a righteous anger over what's happening in the world, it helps us to focus on what is really important. And right now, I think we can be angry over what we're missing, what's going on right now. And it can help us to focus, it can help us to write, it can help us to pray, it can help us to preach with the way we live our lives, much better than perhaps we could otherwise. So on this Thursday, as I thank a theologian, I hope that you're able to join me in giving thanks for the dedication to God's love, grace, and mercy that Martin Luther had, his devotion to God's holy word that teaches us of the amazing love of Christ. Let us share that love today and every day and give thanks to God for the gift of a theologian like Martin Luther, who taught us so much about God's amazing love.